football story. Approximately 60 players in the English Premier League are being impacted by the United Kingdom's requirement to isolate for 10 days upon returning if they travel to a country on the red list during the upcoming international break. The Premier League early on Tuesday said they reluctantly but unanimously decided not to release players for international matches played in red list countries next month. This is already having a wide-reaching consequences as Jamaica will be unable to call upon 10 players for their 3 World Cup qualifiers during this period. Ethan Pinnock, Leon Bailey, Andre Gray, Casey Palmer, Michael Hector, Amari Bell, Bobby Reid, Liam Moore, Daniel Johnson, and Dylan Barnes. Football's world governing body, FIFA, is facing pressure to intervene and to provide an amicable solution to the problem. Well, former Trinidad and Tobago international Brent Sancho joins us now to discuss the latest. Brent, welcome, and what's your stance on the Premier League's latest development? Of course, their collective view that no players, can go play for their international teams.
Well, good afternoon, of course, Mariah, and to you, Lance, and to all your viewers and listeners from the different parts of the world. Look, Mariah, I think there is a tinge of hypocrisy here with this. If you jot your mind back to the European Championship a couple of months ago, there were all sorts of COVID restrictions, rules that were broken during that period of time to allow the different dignitaries to come in for the game. I think there's a general feeling around FIFA and some of the other nations or countries as well that's going to be affected or impacted by this, that the FIFA would have allowed, and the government would have allowed, the English government would have allowed for certain things to happen during the championship. Of course, they hosted the final and they were given a lot of allowances. And I think it is a situation where they felt that you scratch my back and now it's your turn to scratch mine. And so FIFA is expecting for England to create some sort of a sport bubble so the players that are traveling to the respective countries are not impacted. So it'd be interesting to see. There'll be a lot of conversations between this tonight and, of course, tomorrow morning to see if this scratching of the back does come through.
So, Brent, you say it comes across as hypocrisy, right? Why did you say that? Because I feel as if you're onto something that maybe something that we don't.
Well, what I do know is that the England was allowed to host the European Cup finals. They were allowed, as I said, and given some things above the COVID line. They were allowed to bring people in that should not have been in terms of exemptions and the different COVID protocols that is expected for any individual that's entering the UK, coming from, of course, the different restrictive zones. And that was given because at the end of the day, as host for the European Cup finals, England was given certain concessions. So I think the feeling around FIFA is that if you were given those concessions to host that final, if certain concessions were given, then they expect the same to translate here now with this current situation. And I think that is where this lies. That conversation is going to be had. And whoever is able to blink first in that conversation will eventually see their way pulling through.
Yeah, and Brent, it's something that we don't even want to have to picture or imagine right now. But how much of a blow will it be for CONCACAF teams if there isn't a quick turnaround?
Well, I think it's a massive blow. I know there's conversation about, of course, moving it to a neutral venue, but you can just picture trying to move a Mexico game away from Mexico. I mean, that's almost impossible. When you talk about the revenue generated from of course, ticket sales for spectators, television rights, all these different things that comes with a Mexican home game, it's almost impossible to even contemplate playing that at a neutral site. And then, of course, the headache as it relates to travel and all these different things. So for me, it is probably not going to be something that's on the table. I think there's a full expectancy by many within FIFA that this is going to be solved and this is going to of course, come to some sort of solution. Because at the end of the day, there is just so much at stake here. Look, we didn't just wake up yesterday and find out that there's qualifiers coming up. I think there is some sort of expectation within the parties that this is going to be resolved. If you look at some of the statements coming out of the ECA, of course, and the other departments, the clubs in the Premiership, even La Liga having their say as well, many of them were tiptoeing around, of course, blaming anyone in particular. I think they truly expect that something is going to happen and some sort of resolution is going to come to the table.
Yeah, you know, Brent, isn't it at the heart of this situation the factor as well that beyond what is happening now with the quarantine rules and so on, there has always been, I found, a sort of an unwritten resistance from some of these clubs to release players, like our Caribbean players. I know you played for Dundee in Scotland and Gillingham in England almost 20 years ago. Can you speak to the sort of willingness, you know, with open arms of these English clubs allowing players to leave, even without these quarantine issues?
Yeah, look, Lance, I would call it in some aspects disrespect, because when, you know, myself, Darren Byfield, who played for Jamaica, was also part of my club at Gillingham. When we had to leave, of course, to play international games, our manager looked at it as a holiday. And he would say, we're going away on a holiday. And that was the feeling and the general feeling around the club hierarchy. And this is not something new. We've heard of Alec Ferguson and Dwight York and the run-ins that they would have had as it relates to international release. Of course, Sterling John had it in his career, and I could go through a bevy of players going back to play international games. Yes. And I can't think of one manager that was ever happy for a player leaving to go and play on international duty. Yes, it's the games, but obviously the travel and everything that comes in, and I could tell you it was very, very taxing on the body, and 9 times out of 10, any player that has to go through something like that would be absolutely drained coming into the fixture on the weekend. So yes, it is something that a lot of British managers, and I can speak for what happened for my personal situations and others around me, it's something that they didn't want, they didn't like, they hated, and they tried everything to try to prevent. It's only because FIFA came in with such strong sanctions that prevented managers from outright blanking countries from having their players.
Yeah. And it's why I went there, Brent, because with this quarantine situation, with having the players out for even a further extension, it's giving them even more strength to try to resist this. And I think I agree with you about the hypocrisy of it, because, you know, some of the bigger nations, I know Firmino and so on was mentioned for his Brazil duties and so on, but there's no question that Sir Alec Ferguson would look completely differently at Dwight York playing an international for little Trinidad and Tobago, as opposed to some of his big guns who are playing for other European clubs.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the statement in particular by La Liga, they also threw in the fact that in CONMEBOL they threw in that extra date for FIFA, and they were really upset about it. And you're right, Lance, this club versus country battle has been going on for a very, very long time. And it seems to me that the clubs believe, obviously, that they own the players. And if it was down to them, they dictate whether or not the players can go or not. Of course, we have the African Nations Cup in January that's coming up soon, and you've heard a lot of conversations around that. And of course, clubs, of course, going to players. And look, sometimes clubs do go to players and say to them, look, can you miss this tournament? Can you miss this game? That has happened before. I've had that happen to me at Dundee before, where my manager asked me to miss a game. So they do put you under a lot of pressure to miss these games and to make sure that you know, because at the end of the day, a club feels that they're the ones that are paying the players, they're the ones that are giving the players salaries, and so they own the rights of the players, they own the right whether a player should go and play international football or not. And that's the general feeling around European clubs.
Yeah, and finally, Brent, do you share the JFF General Secretary's optimism, Dalton Wint, that they will achieve a waiver and they will get the players they want from England to play against Mexico next Thursday?
Yeah, I do think so, simply because FIFA has been very quiet on this, Lance, and the mere fact that you haven't really had, in fact, you haven't had any statement coming out from FIFA in the last 24 to 48 hours since, of course, all of this have started to happen. It suggests to me that FIFA believe that they have this under control. Meaning that they have the right persons in the right positions to make the diplomatic choices to move this along. And look, it's not hard to do. At the end of the day, you're talking about 60 to 100 players, and to create a bubble around them in their travels, and where they go and the games that they play, it's not a difficult thing to do. So I think at the end of the day, I think some level of diplomacy will play out. And I agree with the General Secretary. I believe the players will be allowed to play.
All right, Brent. So this is a story we'll be monitoring very closely. We'll connect with you again soon. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, guys, have a great one.
Of course, Brent Sancho, they are former TNT international. Well, I invite you to stay with us because we have so much more to come on the SportsMax Zone, including an update on what happened in that second test between West Indies and Pakistan at Sabina Park, and a vibrant Olympic analyst talking about Elaine Thompson-Herah. But before all that, Ashley Nurse joins us next to talk about the Barbados Royals and the CPL. Stay with us.